Awesome. I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Well, good afternoon, and I have just truly enjoyed this session. I'm Tawanda Rooney, the new Director for Diversity and Inclusion for the Department of the Air Force. I recently took over this role in January of this year. Just briefly, in this job, I'm responsible for advising and overseeing the Department of the Air Force's diversity and inclusion programs, policies, and initiatives. And prior to this position, I was the Deputy Director for the Concept Development and Management Office under the Administrative Assistant to the Secretary of the Air Force. In that role, I was responsible for the business operations for multi-billion-dollar portfolio supporting cyber, intelligence, technology, operations, and information program systems. But before I go on, I want to pause to recognize Women's History Month. There are so many women that have been instrumental in my life, starting with my mom, my sisters, my mentors, my sorors, and countless prominent role models that I must pay homage to today. I'm so excited to join this elite group of women. I'm almost nervous because of all of the phenomenal work and the power in this room before me at this Women's in Technology Forum. They've paved the way for women and men. I understand that there may be a few men joining us today to lean in and show up great. I'm especially excited to be here with my colleague and my friend, Ms. Wanda Jones-Heath, who just gave an inspiring, motivating talk about superpower. She talked about those 4 Ps, and I'm encouraged to tap into my superpower more often now. Thanks, my friend. I just have a few points to make, and then I want to hear from the audience on what's important to you. The title of our breakout session is Leading with Impact, Diversity and Inclusion in the Department of Defense. First, I want to talk about what does diversity and inclusion leading with impact means, and I have 4 areas. One, being true to self, being your authentic self. And Wanda, I just want to let you know my superpower is being my authentic self. Showing that you care, inspiring others, encouraging others, mentoring, they talked about that, coaching, but also giving that constructive feedback. I think it's important to make sure people understand where they need to work on. And our people is our greatest asset. We must develop them. We must be sincere in our actions. And this takes work, but it's also leadership. The third area is do what you say you're going to do. Lead with integrity. We cannot truly lead with impact without integrity because people will see straight through that. And the last one is recognize the power of diversity. If you're going to lead with impact, you must be inclusive and know that a diverse group, we're talking race, ethnicity, gender, skills, background, thought, and culture, will yield the best results. And I'll leave you with a quote from General Jacqueline Van Ovos, which is the 5th female 4-star general in the Air Force and currently the only female 4-star in Department of Defense. She says, we're finding that the richness of diversity in our force is what's going to carry us through. If we can have those crucial conversations right now within our force, we know that we can increase the bonds of trust so that we can unchain our airmen to do their very best. Your voice matters. What will you ask? And I'll pause there to take questions from the audience. Thanks.
And I would like to add that, Tawanda's in my network. We are colleagues, we are friends, supporters. I can pick up the phone anytime and call her. So she is one of my mentors as well. And I certainly appreciate what she brings to the table. And congratulations to her. She was recently selected as the first Department of the Air Force Diversity and Inclusion Office Director. So we would love to take your questions. We're here to hear from you and offer what we can as feedback.
Thanks, Wanda.
I'll jump in at a question on this. It's Marty. So I want to circle back to a question I was asking earlier, just about how do you roll some of this stuff out? Like you're at a massive organization. What does this look like on a day-to-day basis?
Are you asking, Marty? I'll take that. And so
Yeah.
as we look at the diversity and inclusion within the Department of the Air Force, first of all, we took a huge leap by making that, creating this office and establishing it directly under the Secretary of the Air Force. So making it a #1 priority. And I think that's an important thing that we must do. Making sure that it's a leadership responsibility. And you're right, it's huge. But as someone said earlier, diversity, I think it was Dr. Baker, diversity and inclusion is everyone's business. And in order for us to really take hold of this, even having it at the top or having a structure, we have to make sure that it's embedded in everything we do. And it certainly is a work in progress. There are areas that we must do better on in some of our underrepresented groups. And from a Department of the Air Force, we're taking responsibility for that because we haven't quite got it right. And so I think by one, identifying that we're going to create this office, making it a priority from a leadership perspective, we're in the process of relooking at how we are structured. What are the right things that we need to put in place to get after this? But one of the things we're hearing from the workforce is that we must not have crucial conversations just when we're looking at a problem set and getting feedback, but we must have that feedback loop. And we must get creative in this space because our younger generation is not going to go to a website or sit down all the time. And so we're looking at better ways and leveraging industry, looking at some benchmarks of how we can really get this right. One of the things I've been talking about is, one, I don't have all of the answers, but two, we have to be persistent. And the persistent piece is really getting after this. To really get after diversity and inclusion, it has to be something that we make decisions about. And so that's the approach that we're taking, being persistent, having those conversations, looking at technology, looking at bringing together a workforce. And our goal is for the Department of the Air Force to be an employee of choice. In order to do that, we must increase our culture and improve that area. We must get after the diversity in some areas where we're not doing so well. And then the third area is we have to track. There are some things that we have done successfully, but how do we track this to make sure that we're meeting the goals that we want to meet?
And Tawanda mentioned leadership. Accountability is huge. I have been watching this and helping and supporting from my actions, and I'm telling you, the top of the tier leadership in the DoD and the department, they're all in. They're leaning in hard, and they're expecting everyone from the airmen in the military, the civilians, the contractors, our dear partners. They're expecting that their actions, accountability, change, a lot of changes have already occurred, and more changes are coming because the reports say that there's a problem, and this leadership is taking action to address everything that is coming up. I am thoroughly impressed. After 31 years of working for the department, I see more action in the last 1.5 to 2 years I've seen my entire career. Very, very impressed.
That's interesting. Can you talk a little bit more specifically about what that looks like with action? Are there like new programs or new initiatives that have been rolling out?
Yeah, one of the areas that we're looking to get a lot of the feedback is really breaking down those barriers. And I love the grassroots approach that we're taking by bringing together what we're calling barrier analysis working groups, but also some consider it as infinity groups, and you can hear employee resource groups. But it really is identifying, we have a women's initiative team, we have Black African American, we have Pacific Asian and Islanders, we have several of the groups. We even just started one for Indigenous nations people team, as well as LGBTQ. And so what we're getting after is what are those barriers in those particular groups. And you don't have to be a part of that infinity group, meaning that that's a part of your demographics, but you're willing to look at those barriers. We also have a disability one. And to me, the importance of that are hearing from those where some of the policies that we put in place, we may not know that it's having a barrier for certain groups, and they're bringing up initiatives. I was really excited to participate in our Women's Initiative team. We co-sponsored with them a 4-day conference symposium last week of women's inaugural Air and Space Symposium, and it really got after some women's issues. Some of the things that we did is, I love the phrase they call the bun is done, where they're now allowed to wear a ponytail. But it was something that was championed and was sent up by the Women's Initiative team. We're also getting after, under the disability team, where now they are allowed to wear Bluetooth into secure areas. But we wouldn't have never known that that was an issue until it was brought up from a grassroots perspective. And there's other policies that we're taking a look at. You all are aware, based in December, that the racial disparity report came out, focused on African Americans and getting after some of the areas that were some disparities in terms of promotion as well as punishments. And now we're getting at root cause analysis. And so you'll start seeing us report on those things. What actions are we going to take to get after some of those disparities? We just launched the second one, which is really looking at ethnicity, gender, and some other areas for underrepresented groups for the same reason. How are we taking advantage of what we're hearing from our airmen and really looking at data? We're really going to move forward with data-driven decisions, and that's one of the big things that we're really going to highlight going forward. Take the action based on data-driven decisions, and the last thing I'll say is track the results. How do we actually track the results to show that we're actually making some progress in some of the areas? I'll stop there.
Amazing. We're going to just invite everybody in to speak. If anybody has something that they want to say, they can put it into the chat, or they can raise their hand and push that forward. We do have a background noise, so maybe mute is helpful.
Hey, Marty. Oh, go ahead,
yeah.
Marty.
No, go for it, Tawanda.
Hey, Marty, I don't know if, unless we have a question, I just wanted to share just my career, just to kind of give a perspective of, you know, my background and experience. I think it's important to put it in perspective of, you know, how we get here and some of the obstacles or some of the challenges that we face, and then some of the successes. I heard the earlier conversation about sponsorship, and I think it's important for us to talk about that. So I started, my bio may be out there, but I started in the Air Force under the summer hire program, and I know Wanda talked about being in the internship, but I came in right out of high school. Just before I went into college, they had a program called the summer hire program, and I came in as a GS2, worked through college for 4 years. After graduating from college, looked around and ended up coming and applying for another position in the Air Force. At that time, they didn't necessarily have all of the programs that they had, but I found myself a job at a GS5 level, working for Space at the time. Space was under the Air Force, and I worked under acquisition. And I found myself most times, even in that environment as a GS5, the only woman and the only person of color in every meeting and every office that I entered. But I had some strong people that helped me through the summer hire program, that mentored me, that showed me excellence as I went through, you know, my career. But one of the things that General Brown said last week at the Women's Symposium, he says, it's not comfortable being the only one in the room. It's not prestigious at all being the only one. But that became my norm throughout my career. I tried to figure out how to navigate through that. And how I did is I showed up every day working hard. Wanda talked about being prepared. Many of us talked about making sure that we're deliberate and show up. I showed up every day ensuring that I did my best, not because I wanted to prove that I could, but because of the women in my life. I talked about my mom, my sister, my mentor, Dale Shaw, was my first supervisor as a summer hire, who showed what excellent looked like. I had that as my standard. And then when I showed up, others noticed. My supervisors early in my career provided me with developmental opportunities, seeing something in me and willing to give me opportunities. And these were mostly white males. I was in the inaugural Squadron Officer School, which is for captains in the military and in the Air Force. Civilians didn't participate in it. It normally was about, I think it started out 12 weeks when I did it back in 93. It was a 7-week course in Maxwell, Alabama. And at that time, they were trying to do a beta to see how civilians would perform in a course like that. And they offered it for 40 civilians. I was nominated by my supervisor to be a part of that. I hadn't a clue of what I was getting into, but those are the opportunities that a white male offered to me. My first SES position was the director for the Information and Engineering Lab. I had program management skills, acquisition, budgeting, intel, but not engineering background. And I had been a program manager for a lot of the lab efforts, but I almost talked myself out of applying for that job because I didn't necessarily think I had the technical skills to do the job. But they needed a leader, and they needed someone with that background. And so I leaned in, and I tapped into my superpowers. And it wasn't easy, but I'm here today. So when I lead with those examples that I must show up for others, for them to see the possibility that they too can lead. So when they see Tawanda Rooney as an African-American female senior executive, they know that it's possible for them as well. And we talked about being that support for one another. I think Dr. Baker mentioned that, and I think that's oh so important, especially for women.
Wow, amazing. I'm actually going to invite Tracy to jump on here as well. Tawanda, I really appreciate what you say about the role models and just being able to see it. And I think that is half the battle in a lot of ways, which is why when I see numbers like 2% of the engineers being women of color, those are numbers that have to change, right? Those are incredible numbers that are just not acceptable anymore, because we need more young women, more young men to see that and to see the role models that exist. Because I think even, in the US, we have very particular social constructs that have gotten in the way. But when you start broadening this into a global conversation as well, there's so many more intricacies to this as well. And, we need all sorts of people as role models in all these different areas. So I really commend this. And it's absolutely fascinating to hear your career path. And Wanda's, I've just been blown away by both of you on this. Tracy, I am going to ask you as well. I have a lot that I want to hear from everybody. It's so hard to only have a short time with people. But Tracy, you have talked about the global side to that as well, and you've been and just to touch back on that. And I'm going to put you on the spot for a few minutes just to touch base on that before we come back to Tawanda and Wanda on this.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak with you more about this today. I'm honored to share my thoughts about this topic, and I'm really passionate about it. And it's how to embrace and enable women in and with technology all over the globe. All of you today with us know that you won't find a more exciting and transformative industry than tech. But the reality is it's an industry that needs more diversity and including more women. Diverse teams help us think bigger about the products and services we build, think differently about the day-to-day nature of the work we do. Diversity among our workforce allows us to check our unconscious biases, look around corners, and challenge our own assumptions. This is key to the work we do at Amazon. In my role at Amazon Web Services, I help global public sector and intergovernment organizations achieve their missions through cloud computing. And we talked about that. That's my passion. For organizations like these, cloud computing is critical to helping them encourage economic growth, inclusion, diversity, equity, and financial and monetary stability. These missions have become even more important during the COVID-19 pandemic. As the world suffers the economic slowdown, trade, investment, growth, employment, and access to financing are all impacted. And in many ways, women are suffering these impacts disproportionately. To help address these challenges, we've been working with organizations such as the United Nations Economic Commission for Asia and the Pacific, as well as the UN Capital Development Fund, to support women-owned and focused enterprises impacted by COVID-19 through their Women's Economic Recovery Fund. This support reaches women around the world, including countries such as Bangladesh, Cambodia, Indonesia, Myanmar, Nepal, and Vietnam. AWS is supporting this effort by providing credits, technical assistance, mentorship, we talked about that earlier, to the applicants through our AWS Activate program, which sponsors tech startups globally. We're also looking at ways cloud technology can promote financial inclusion and inclusive economic aggregate growth, which is critical. It's not just a matter of being inclusive, you also have to consider the entire region. One way to do this is to extend financial access to unbanked and underbanked populations. As part of my work at AWS, my team is exploring how central bank digital currencies could increase financial access for these communities. Although physical cash remains popular in many countries, its use as a means of payment is falling globally. This trend has accelerated during the COVID-19 pandemic, raising concerns for emerging economies where many lack access to a bank account, meaning physical cash is their only payment option. A central bank digital currency system could help expand financial inclusion. I'm excited, we're excited about the opportunities cloud technology presents to increase financial access to communities around the globe. But this work brings me back to how to support women like everyone here today. As an industry, that's as impactful as tech. Our roles as consumers, educators, scientists, and entrepreneurs give us the opportunity to get involved in a way that can positively influence inclusivity, diversity, and equity efforts around the globe. And my advice to women is to take a seat at the table. Be sure to speak up. You have a voice and you deserve to be heard. You may need to build that muscle. You may stumble, but anything is possible if you're curious and you want to learn and you're not afraid to fail, because failure is always a part of learning. Once you're there, make sure you're pulling other women along. Give them strong sponsorship, strong feedback, and roles and responsibilities to challenge them so they can demonstrate that they can do more. The actions we take every day that we often don't even think about can have a critical impact on closing the gender gap. We have, for sure, a long way to go to get to where we need to be. For too many women and other minority groups, the tech industry can be a lonely place. But tech can bring people together. It has even brought us together virtually here today. And through organizations like the Future of Women in Tech and through the actions we take each day, we can create power in community. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak.
Thanks, Tracy. It's super interesting to hear, these themes that I'm hearing from Tawanda and from Wanda and from you. They're just incredible nuggets in terms of like how people can take action, how people, need to think about it, and how people can address their own personal careers. I mean, Tawanda, I'm still blown away by your story and just like the different, how you move forward in just these different areas and the championship that you experienced, and that you recognize what that looked like, that it was a pivotal part of your career. What do you think people can do today to take action? That was a question we were asking earlier, but what is that to you? What do you think should happen?
Yeah, I think a lot has been said already, and I think preparation is a really critical piece of it, and I think we can always do that on a day-to-day basis. As I came into this new role as Diversity and Inclusion Director, I had to prepare, and I'm still preparing, and I'm still learning, and I'm leaning in, and I think we just got to show up. And the other thing is we got to take a step at a time. I think we put one foot in front of the other. In this diversity and inclusion space, and I laugh, and it's not necessarily all that funny, but it really is a long game. And it's something that we have to continue to do. And if we're going to have to continue to do it, to try to eat the whole elephant all at one time becomes very daunting. And so when I get up every morning, I have to put that one step in front of the other. Can I put together something that is biteable and something that is achievable to really get to that? And it really is going outside that comfort zone. There are people in this space that I haven't worked with, and so I'm having to, build those relations and build those partnerships that we talked about. But I really think just showing up and being in that moment and taking that responsibility, leaning in. And I have to go back to what my mom and my sister and many of my mentors told me, excellence is the standard. Doesn't necessarily mean that I'm always going to get things right, but if I achieve and if I move forward. The other thing is leaning on sisters and women like you all to really reach out, because that's where our power is, because we can do multiple things, and they talked about it earlier. I thought about, all the things I have to do when I leave the office today, right? And so because we can multi-flex that way, we have an ability to make some stuff happen, but we have to reach into the network that we have, and I think that's an important piece, and support one another. But I think my biggest thing for us is don't get overwhelmed and take one step at a time. And even if we fall backwards, just get up the next day and take that next step.
I love that, because I've been feeling that in terms of the numbers where we have gone backwards, right? And I'm going to get this stat kind of wrong, but after the financial crisis, it took about 10 years to get numbers back up for women and the pay scale back into the workplace. So I look at that, and then I look at what's going on since COVID, and it is a daunting thing. So I'd love hearing you say that, like one step after another. And Wanda, bring our superpower home, as I know we are sadly out of time in this event. And you have just been a huge inspiration for everybody coming on to this event today. So I'd love to give last words to you to bring us home.
Okay, thank you. There has been a lot said and shared. I would encourage folks to take action, whatever that action is. Don't sit on the sidelines. Don't be afraid to fail. Every success comes with failure, multiple failures. Learn from it. Take those risks. Be self-confident. Don't disqualify yourself, because you never know where you can end up. I started as a GS7, and now I'm an SCS, leading in the Air Force, along with some wonderful folks like Tawanda and others.
Love it. Thank you, ladies. It's amazing to end here. I'm so inspired, and just a great way to go on with my day, which is I'm still in California, so I've got the afternoons. But thank you for today and these words of wisdom. I really appreciate your time, your energy, and your commitment to this. Thanks everybody in the audience, and everybody who's watching it on live stream. Take care.
All righty. Thanks a lot.